So here's the thing, folks. Mel Gibson just got his gun rights restored. And if you're watching the news, you'd think the country's on the edge of collapse. The anti-gun talking heads are screaming, Twitter warriors are losing their minds, and the headlines make it sound like Hollywood just kicked off the apocalypse. But let's cut through the noise. This ain't really about Mel Gibson the actor. Doesn't matter if he swung a sword in Braveheart or carried a musket in The Patriot. What matters is the principle. Can the government take away your Second Amendment rights forever, off of one mistake, one misdemeanor, that happened well over a decade ago? Think about it like this. Say you're a mechanic in Texas, or a bartender in Ohio. You get into a heated argument one night, cops show up, and boom! You've now got a domestic-related misdemeanor on your record. From that moment on, you're barred from touching a firearm for the rest of your life. Doesn't matter if you turn things around, stay clean for 20 years, raise a family, and live responsibly. That one mark brands you forever. That's why Gibson's story matters. His face might be on the screen, but the debate cuts way deeper than celebrity gossip. It's about redemption, due process, and whether Americans believe in second chances. If we're honest, most of us don't care about Hollywood drama. We care about the principle. Back in 2011, Gibson ended up in court over a domestic dispute. He didn't fight it, didn't admit guilt either. He pled no contest. Now, in plain English, that means the system still counts it as a conviction. And under the Lautenberg Amendment, that's all it takes to slam the door on your Second Amendment rights for life. Here's the kicker. Lautenberg doesn't care if you're a repeat abuser or if it was a one-time heated argument where somebody shoved somebody else. The law doesn't separate the chronic threats from the people who just lost their temper once. It's one size fits all. Bang, you're banned forever. Think about that. If a guy gets into one stupid argument, maybe during a messy breakup, that mistake follows him for the rest of his life. Doesn't matter if he's been clean for 10, 15, 20 years. That's the kind of blanket approach that gets people fired up. Because if the law doesn't recognize the difference between a danger to society and somebody who made one mistake, then it's not really justice. It's just punishment for punishment's sake. Now, here's where the media comes in. Instead of asking the hard question, does one misdemeanor really deserve a lifetime ban? They go for the Hollywood angle. They drag out Gibson's old scandals, his controversial comments, even his political leanings, and make the whole thing sound like some backroom favor. But here's what they don't say. Gibson wasn't the only one. The Department of Justice approved 9 other petitions at the exact same time. 9 other Americans got their rights back, but you never saw their faces on the evening news. Why? Because ordinary citizen regains rights doesn't sell clicks. Hollywood star tied to Trump gets guns again? That gets the outrage machine cranking. And let me be straight with you. If the man was still a threat, I'd be the first to say, keep him disarmed. But we're talking 14 years with no new charges, no repeat incidents, no record of violence since. Either we believe people can turn their lives around, or we're saying once you mess up, you're marked forever. That's the core of the fight right there. Do we stand for second chances? Or do we let politics and headlines decide who gets their rights back? Here's what most folks don't realize. There's an actual legal path for getting your rights back. It's written right into federal law. 18 U.S.C. Section 925, subsection C. That little section says, if you're federally prohibited from owning firearms, you can file a petition with the Department of Justice. They're supposed to review your life, your record, your behavior, and decide if you're still a danger or not. Sounds fair, right? In theory, it's the safety valve that separates a lifelong abuser from somebody who just had one meltdown years ago. Trouble is, back in the early 90s, Congress basically pulled the plug on it. They defunded the process after some folks claimed violent felons were slipping through. And that meant for decades, regular Americans who wanted a second chance were out of luck. Paperwork sat in a file cabinet collecting dust. So when the DOJ approved Gibson's petition, along with those 9 others, that wasn't some secret favor. That was the law finally being put back into practice, even if only in a limited way. To me, that's a good thing. Because if the government offers no path at all, then you don't just lose faith in the system. You risk courts striking these bans down completely for being too broad. And that's the irony here. Letting a man with a 14-year clean record prove he's not a threat might actually protect the system's ability to keep truly dangerous people disarmed. That's the piece the media never tells you. Now, of course, politics had to jump into the mix. Inside the Department of Justice, Elizabeth Oyer, she was the pardon attorney at the time, flat out refused to sign off on Gibson's restoration. Not because she had evidence he was dangerous right now, but because she thought the optics were bad. She worried it would look like a Hollywood Trump supporter was getting special treatment. Shortly after, she was out of the job, and the media pounced on that like fresh meat. Oh, look, Gibson only got approved because of politics, because of Trump, because of connections. That's the narrative they ran with. But when you dig into the paperwork, the DOJ said they followed the law, looked at the record, and found Gibson met the requirements. Here's the important part. Oyer never produced evidence that Gibson posed a current threat. Her issue was purely how it looked. And let me tell you, if we're making constitutional decisions based on how it looks, we've already lost. The Second Amendment isn't about optics, it's about rights. And this is where we've got to keep our heads straight. Was Gibson's case high profile? Sure. But the standard the government used to approve him, that applies to anybody. At least, it should. The real problem isn't that Gibson got through, it's that everyday Americans still can't get their petitions even read because the system's been defunded for decades. Here's where it gets interesting. Some legal scholars and even judges have warned that permanent, one-size-fits-all gun bans are standing on shaky ground. Courts are looking harder at these laws and asking, do they actually line up with the Second Amendment? And the truth is, if you don't allow any path for redemption, you risk the whole thing being struck down as unconstitutional. That's why some professors have argued that giving people like Gibson a chance to petition actually protects the system. Think about it. If you only block truly dangerous, repeat offenders, the bans are more likely to survive in court. But if you slam the door on everybody, no matter how minor the offense, no matter how long ago, you're basically daring the courts to throw it all out. And that's the irony. Letting a guy with a 14-year clean record earn his rights back might be the smartest way to make sure bans still stick to the people who actually are a threat. If we refuse that balance, we don't just lose fairness, we might lose the entire restriction altogether. Look, I'm not saying Mel Gibson is some model citizen. The man's had his share of screw-ups, no question about it. But this isn't about liking or disliking him. It's about the principle. Can the system tell the difference between somebody who blew it once and someone who lives a violent lifestyle? If the answer's no, then we don't have justice. We just have permanent punishment. Now, if you listen to guys like Colion Noir, he'll tell you straight up, this debate isn't about Mel Gibson. It's about the integrity of the Second Amendment itself. Because if the government can't distinguish between a guy who shoved someone one time 14 years ago and a repeat abuser who's a genuine danger, then due process is dead in the water. And he's right. The Constitution doesn't say, you have the right to keep and bear arms unless we decide to hold one mistake over your head forever. That's not liberty. That's a lifetime penalty box. I'll put it this way. If a man's so dangerous that he can never be trusted with a firearm again, why's he walking free? Why is he out in society at all? But if he's free, living a normal life, raising a family, paying his taxes, and not hurting anybody, then at what point do we admit he's earned his rights back? That's the question Noir's pushing, and a lot of us feel the same way. This isn't about defending Gibson as a person. The man's had issues, no doubt. It's about whether the law treats regular Americans with the same fairness. Because if only celebrities can cut through the red tape, then the system's broken. Here's what really grinds my gears. If Mel Gibson's connections helped push his petition through, the answer isn't to shut the whole system down. It's to open it up so everyone gets the same chance. A truck driver in Kansas, a school teacher in Florida, a bartender in Ohio, they all deserve the same pathway Gibson had. Imagine if the process was actually funded, transparent, and working the way Congress wrote it decades ago. You'd have hundreds, maybe thousands of regular folks applying, showing they've lived stable, law-abiding lives since their mistakes. The ones who prove they're safe get their rights back. The ones who can't, they stay restricted. Simple, fair, and honest. But because the program's been starved of funding for years, the only stories we ever hear are the sensational ones about celebrities. That's what makes the headlines. And then people scream favoritism instead of asking the bigger question, why isn't this available to everyone? I'll tell you this, if we fixed the system so everyday citizens could go through the same review process, Gibson's case wouldn't even make the news. It'd just be one of many. And that's exactly how it should be. Rights restored by law, not by headlines. Now, let's be clear. Domestic violence is serious. Nobody's brushing that off. Nobody wants to see a real abuser get a gun and do something horrible. But the public rarely gets the full picture of how broad those statutes really are. Sometimes all it takes is a single shove, a heated argument, or even just pleading out to avoid a messy trial. And boom, you're branded for life. No shades of gray, no context. The law treats that one night the same as a chronic pattern of violent abuse. And here's the thing. If we really believe someone is too dangerous to ever be trusted with a firearm, then why are they free at all? If they've paid their debt, stayed clean, and proven they're living responsibly, does it make sense to keep punishing them forever? Or are we just pretending they'll never change so we can justify a permanent ban? That's not just unfair, it's shaky ground legally. Courts have already started calling out these blanket bans for being too broad. And if the government doesn't start applying some common sense, we could lose the whole restriction altogether. Because once judges see there's no room for context, they're forced to strike it down. So, ironically, the best way to protect society and the Constitution might be to allow redemption for people who've proven they deserve it. That way, bans stay in place for the truly dangerous, and rights are restored for those who've earned them back. Here's the bottom line. If the system offers no path for redemption, then it's not a justice system anymore. It's just a permanent punishment machine. And that's dangerous, because once the courts realize these bans have no off-ramp, they're going to tear the whole thing down. Think about the irony. By refusing to let a man prove he's changed, you might actually end up losing every restriction we have, even the ones that keep truly violent offenders disarmed. That's not smart policy. That's self-sabotage. So the real question isn't, do I like Mel Gibson? The real question is, does one bad night 14 years ago mean a man should never touch a firearm again? If the answer is yes, then we're admitting we don't believe in second chances at all. But if the answer is no, if we believe people can change, then the process should be open, fair, and available to everyone, not just the famous faces. Hollywood made this story louder, sure, but under the law, Gibson is just another citizen. If he's met the requirements, kept his record clean, and the authorities find he's not a threat, then that's due process in action. And that's exactly what the Second Amendment is supposed to protect. So, I'll leave it with you guys. Do lifetime bans for a single misdemeanor make sense? Or should there always be a path back once somebody's proven they've changed? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. I really want to hear where you stand on this. And hey, if you got value out of this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a buddy who loves these kinds of discussions. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Stay sharp.